Step out of the vehicle now. The command sliced through the warm, quiet afternoon of Willow Creek Lane. Alina Clark gripped the steering wheel tighter, her 7-year-old daughter, Eliza, falling silent in the back seat. The suburban street had been calm moments ago, the sound of Eliza's giggles still lingering in the air from a story about school. Now, red and blue lights flashed in Alina's rear-view mirror. She'd been driving home from a friend's house, her mind already on dinner, when the patrol car appeared from a side street and pulled in behind her. No speeding, no missed stop sign, nothing that should have drawn police attention. Still, she eased the car to the curb, breathing steadily for Eliza's sake. 4 blocks away, her husband, David Clark, an undercover federal agent, was heading home early to surprise them. He spotted the cruiser behind his wife's sedan and slowed down. Something in his gut tightened. Alina rolled down her window as the officer approached. He was a white man in his 40s, his posture radiating hostility before he even spoke. "License and registration," he barked. "Of course," Alina replied evenly, handing them over. "But could you tell me why I was stopped?" "You've got a broken taillight," he said flatly. That was a lie. David had just had the car serviced last week. Before she could respond, the officer added, "You people always have an excuse, don't you?" Alina's chest tightened. Eliza, sensing the tension, pressed herself against her seatbelt. From his car, David's eyes narrowed. He couldn't hear the words, but the officer's stance, too close, too aggressive, set alarms ringing in his mind. He pulled over half a block away, out of sight but close enough to intervene. "Step out of the vehicle," the officer ordered again, louder. "My daughter's in the back," Alina said calmly. "Is that really what I asked?" "I said step out," he shouted, his hand hovering near his holster. David's pulse spiked. Years of training told him the situation was turning dangerous. Alina opened her door slowly, her palms visible. Eliza's wide eyes followed her mother as she stepped onto the pavement. "Hands on the car," the officer snapped. Alina complied instantly. "I'm not resisting," she said softly. "I just want to make sure my daughter's safe." The officer ignored her, his face twisting with irritation as if her obedience itself was an affront. And then it happened. No warning. His fist slammed into her cheekbone with a sickening crack. Alina crumpled to the asphalt, her hands clutching her face. Eliza's scream tore through the street. David was already moving, badge in hand, sprinting toward them. "Get away from her!" His voice roared across the space, stopping the officer mid-movement. The officer spun around, confusion flashing into dread as he saw the gold federal badge gleaming in the sun. David closed the distance in seconds, shoving past him to kneel by Alina. "I'm here," David said, his voice breaking as he inspected her swelling cheek. Eliza was sobbing in the car, her small fist pressed to the glass. The officer stammered, "I didn't know." David's gaze snapped up, cold and sharp. "Didn't know she was my wife? Is it your defense for assaulting a woman in front of her child?" A small crowd was gathering now, phones out, filming. Murmurs rippled through them. Some were already calling 911 to report the assault. "I thought she was resisting," the officer mumbled. "Resisting?" David's voice was pure steel. "She did everything you told her. The only threat here is you." Eliza's sobs grew louder as Alina winced in pain. David rose, his frame towering over the officer. "You're finished," he said, his tone low and deadly. The officer took an uneasy step back, his earlier arrogance collapsing into panic. Sweat rolled down his temple. "We can work this out." "No need to. Don't even try." David cut him off. Sirens wailed in the distance. Another patrol car screeched to a stop and a second officer stepped out, eyes widening at the sight. A wounded woman, a furious federal agent, and dozens of witnesses recording every second. The tension in the air grew thick enough to choke on. The first officer's hand twitched near his belt, but he didn't dare move further. The newcomer froze, scanning the scene, unsure whether to approach David or arrest his colleague. Alina sat on the curb, one arm around Eliza, who had bolted from the car to cling to her. David kept himself between them and the officer, every muscle taut. The street was silent now, except for the distant wail of another approaching siren. The crowd pressed in, their cameras still rolling, their eyes darting between the agent, the injured mother, and the pale, trembling officer who realized, perhaps too late, that his career, his freedom, and maybe more hung by a thread. David's jaw clenched as he took a step toward him. "You're going to answer for every second of this," he said. And that was when Alina Vance had always carried herself with quiet confidence, the kind that came from years of navigating boardrooms, where every glance was a silent calculation. That morning, she stepped off the airport escalator in a tailored Navy suit, her rolling carry-on clicking rhythmically against the polished floor. She was there for a single meeting, one that could alter the fate of her company. But before she could even reach the exit, a commotion drew her attention. A tall man in a gray overcoat, Marcus Thorne, a high-ranking airline executive, was gesturing sharply at a younger employee near the VIP lounge. His tone was low but laced with impatience. The employee's posture tightened, her eyes darting nervously between Marcus and Alina. Moments later, Marcus turned his focus on her. "Ms. Vance, I presume," he said, voice deliberately neutral. Alana nodded, maintaining a faint smile that concealed her irritation. The air between them carried the weight of unspoken history. Rumors of block deals, strategic leaks, and decisions made behind closed doors. They moved toward the lounge where Emerald City's skyline shimmered beyond the glass. Waiting inside was Serafina Hart, an investor whose word could shift markets overnight. She rose to greet Alina warmly, though her eyes flicked toward Marcus with a calculating sharpness. "We need to talk now," Serafina said, gesturing toward a corner table. Their conversation unfolded like a chess match. Serafina spoke of opportunity, mergers, capital injections, and new international routes. Marcus, however, countered with warnings about instability, hinting at internal disputes and leadership challenges. Alina listened, parsing each word for the real game underneath. Then Serafina dropped the pivot. A confidential memo had surfaced, implicating a board member in diverting funds from a major project. The problem was the memo also contained subtle insinuations about Alina's management, details too precise to be coincidence. She knew exactly whose fingerprints would be on it. Marcus sat back, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Transparency is important," he said smoothly. "Sometimes that means difficult truths come to light." Alina's fingers tightened around her coffee cup, but her voice stayed level. "And sometimes it means manufactured truths designed to shift power." She turned to Serafina. "You've known my track record for years. If you think this memo tells the full story, you're underestimating me and overestimating whoever handed it to you." The rest of the meeting played out under a tense, brutal calm. When it ended, Serafina didn't commit to either side. Instead, she promised to review the situation before making her decision. That left the next move squarely in Alina's hands. Outside, the winter air bit against her cheeks. She dialed the secure number, her voice low. "Willow Creek Lane, Suite 14. Tonight." Hours later, under the muted glow of the city, Alina sat across from her most trusted advisor. They dissected the memo line by line, tracing its language back to an internal communications channel only a handful of people could access. The trail pointed not just to Marcus, but to a shadow network within the company's upper ranks. The plan that emerged was surgical. Alina would feed them a piece of information, harmless but enticing, through a controlled leak. If Marcus and his allies took the bait, it would lead them into a verifiable trap. By dawn, the bait had been set, and by midday, the trap had snapped shut. Digital forensics confirmed the leak had passed through Marcus's private server before reaching an external news outlet. It was undeniable evidence of misconduct. When Serafina called, her voice carried none of the hesitation from the lounge. "I reviewed everything. The board will be informed. You'll have my full backing at the next session." That evening, Alina walked past the same glass wall where she had first seen Emerald City's skyline shimmering. This time her reflection looked back at her with a sharper edge. Marcus's career wasn't over. Men like him always found new corridors of influence, but his hold on hers had been broken. The game would go on with new players and new tactics. But Alina had learned something vital. Survival in her world wasn't just about outlasting your opponents. It was about letting them believe until the very last moment that they still had a chance.